Something exciting is happening. Many Jews today feel the need for a revitalized Judaism. People are searching for a more vital and authentic mode of Jewish expression, and more than ever we need to shift, not only physically, but spiritually out of exile mode. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Is the Temple Mount a holy place to the Jewish people today, according to Halacha?
The simple answer to that question is that it is a mahaloket. There is a discussion amongst the sages in the Talmud on this very question. In a number of places it appears in the Talmud. One of those places is Masechet Shavuot, Daf Tet Zayin, where we find the opinion, one opinion that states that Kedusha Rishona Kiddusha l'sha'ata wa kiddusha le'atid lavo, which means that the original Kiddusha of the place, the spot on which the Miqdash was built, the temple was built, that Kiddusha was installed and created at the time of the inauguration of the first Miqdash, the time of Shilo HaMelech, King Solomon, and that Kiddusha is in place to this very day. That Kedusha remains untouched, immutable. It cannot be nullified, it cannot be changed. It is there, on site, and the original Kedusha is a one-time process, a one-time reality. Once it is in place, it does not leave that place. So the original Kedusha of HaBayith and Machon Miqdash, the place, the site of the temple on HaBayith, which is not the same as HaBayith. There is a Temple Mount, and within the Temple Mount there is a much smaller area, which is the actual site where the Miqdash was situated. That Kedusha is in place and remains so to this day. The other opinion in the Talmud over there is that Kedusha Rishona lo Kiddusha le'atid lavo. In other words, that Kedusha installed and created at the time of the building and the inauguration of the first Miqdash by Shilo HaMelech was nullified and ceased to exist at the time of the Hurban, of the destruction of the first temple. It follows, therefore, that with regards to the second temple, according to the first view, that the original Kedusha remains in place till this day, then there was no need to reinvent the Kedusha, so to speak. One had to simply rebuild the actual walls, the roof, the actual structure of the Miqdash in order to have a temple. But the Kedusha, the holiness, was in place. According to the other view, the view that Kedusha Rishona lo Kiddusha le'atid lavo is not for all time, and therefore does not exist after the time of the destruction of the first temple. Therefore, the second Miqdash had the Kedusha, the holiness of the site, had to be reinvented, so to speak, had to be reinstalled at the time of the building and the inauguration of the second Miqdash. And this, of course, raises the question, what about today, after the destruction of the second Miqdash? These two opinions differ very clearly and obviously with regards to this very question. According to the view that Kedusha Rishona, Kiddusha le'atid lavo, that it is for all time, therefore the Kedusha remains in place, and all we need to do today is to build the Miqdash. But the Kedusha has always been there, and therefore it is a holy site to the Jewish people, the holiest site to the Jewish people on earth. According to the other view, that Kedusha Rishona lo Kiddusha le'atid lavo, and was therefore nullified and ceased to exist at the time of the destruction of the second temple, therefore the area of HaBayith, the Temple Mount, and the actual site within the Temple Mount where the Miqdash stood, those sites, those areas are in no way holy or special at this point in time to the Jewish people, and therefore that the site of the Miqdash today, according to that second view, is exactly the same as the Kedusha that exists on Rehov Dizengoff in Tel Aviv, for example.
What are the practical ramifications regarding what the rabbi has just said?
These other further ramifications and implications are very often not drawn, and people are not fully aware of what this discussion really signifies. So let me try and explain what we can learn, what we must understand about this halachic discussion and this difference and divergence of views. According to the view that Kedusha Rishona Kedusha Atid Lavo, which is, as we said, the view of the Rambam, that the Kedusha of the site of the Miqdash, where the Miqdash stood, is eternal and immutable and cannot be nullified in any way. That means that at any moment in history when the Jewish people are able to get their act together politically, spiritually, in every other sense, and rebuild the Miqdash in the physical sense, that is to say, to bring the bricks and the mortar, etc., and put the building together based on the Halachic requirements, as we find in Masechet Midot, or as we find in the Rambam in HaBayith Behira, whenever we are able to do that, we are required to do so. And by doing so, we are performing the mitzvah of Wa'asuli Miqdash V'shachanti B'tocham. We are performing the mitzvah of building a Miqdash, as we are commanded to do in the Torah, as the Rambam mentions and quotes as a mitzvah aseh, as a positive commandment at the beginning of Yichol Beit HaBehira. In other words, there is no halachic impediment. There is nothing holding us back. It is only a question of whether we want to do it and whether we're able to do it and overcome any obstacles that may exist and any individuals or groups or nations that may wish to prevent us doing so. But the halachic status of the site is such that it is just waiting and yearning for the Miqdash to be rebuilt and erected on that site, and there's nothing else that needs to be done. Whereas, according to the other view, which is the view of the Ra'avad, that the original Kedusha is no longer in existence. There is no Kedusha on that site at all. Even if you were to bring all the bricks and the mortar in the world, and you were to recreate the edifice of the Miqdash based on all the halachic requirements in Masechet Midot, for example, it would not be a Miqdash. It would be equivalent or analogous to building the structure of the Miqdash based on all the halachic requirements in Argentina, for example, or in Ukraine, or in New Zealand. There is no meaning to that structure on that site because there is no inherent Kedusha, where the special Kedusha required for that site where the Miqdash stands is missing. And therefore it is not a Miqdash, and therefore to rebuild such a Miqdash at such a time, before that Kedusha is reinstated, is an exercise in futility. And this is a very, very important point that we must understand. We must internalize the difference between these two worldviews. What we essentially are discussing are two understandings, two very different understandings of Judaism, both now and going back a long time in history, going back to the time of the Second Temple. According to the one view that the original Kedusha is in place and is eternal and cannot be nullified, cannot be changed in any way, the Jewish people are always living in a state of wishing to move forward, and we are in fact able to move forward, move towards a state of Geula, towards Geula mode Judaism, if we are only able to get our act together. If the Jewish people return en masse to Eretz Yisrael, if they organize themselves in such a way and they are led by such a regime, such a government that actually wants these things to happen, then these things will happen and the Miqdash will be rebuilt. And the Jewish people will find themselves in a very different state of affairs, in a very different and a much more authentic and desirable state of affairs, a more authentic and technically correct and proper and halachically valid form of Judaism, as described in the Torah, as described in the Mishnah, as described in the Talmud, etc., etc. And that is the view of the Rambam. This is the view that we find stressed in the Talmud Yerushalmi, and it is the view that we see also, to some extent at least, implied in the revolt against Bar Kochva, which was supported by Rabbi Akiva and his students, and apparently by most of the Chachamim at that time. In other words, it's a proactive approach to Judaism. Whereas the other view, which holds that the original Kedusha is lacking and cannot be reinstated, and this is a point that by human agency, can only be reinstated by some miraculous, supernatural means, above and beyond the abilities and the ken of human beings, as the Ravad writes in that comment of his in Chol Bet HaBahira Perek Shishi, where he talks about the Kedusha being returned to that place by some Kiddush Olami, some kind of universal, supernatural event which will recreate the Kedusha, the original Kedusha of HaBayith and Miqdash. And although without actually saying so, the Ravad seems to be implying what Rashi writes in Masechet Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed and Masechet Sukkah Daf Mem Bet, that the future Miqdash will fall from heaven. He seems to be implying something like that. At such a time, the Kedusha will return, the Miqdash will return, but this will not happen through the actions or the activities or the activism of the Jewish people. This will happen from heaven by heavenly decree, and the Jewish people are essentially passive and bystanders. And this is a huge difference, because according to the view of the Rambam and the Yerushalmi, the view that Kedusha Rishona Kedusha Atid Lavo, the Jewish people are always able to change their reality. They're always able to move forward, to leave behind Galut mode Judaism and move forward towards realizing the goal and the aspiration and the purpose of the Jewish people on earth, which is Geula mode Judaism. According to the view, however, of the Ravad, which is more obviously connected to the Talmud Bavli in many respects, and is clearly the essential hashkafic position of the Haredi world today, as opposed to the former position, which is essentially the hashkafic position of the Dati Lomi or the religious Zionist world today. According to the more Haredi and the more Bavli and the Ravad approach, we are not in a position, we are entirely incapable of changing the reality in which we find ourselves, or the Jewish people have found themselves traditionally up until recent history. That is to say, to break out of Galut mode Judaism, that is an impossibility. We cannot reinstate that Kedusha. We have to wait for something to happen, to fall from heaven, something which is beyond our ability, something which has nothing to do with human activity. And that means that by definition, Galut mode Judaism is all there is, and that's all you can do. You can just maintain that type of Galut reality, the reality in which the Jewish people are not able to move forward, are not able to realize their aim and their purpose on earth as described in the Torah. And we find ourselves essentially in an eternal waiting game, waiting for someone else, that is to say for HaKadosh Baruch Hu or some supernatural event to come along and change the reality for us. And this creates a very different kind of Judaism, a Judaism which is passive, a Judaism which is essentially without hope, without direction, without vision, without dynamism. And these are two very different versions of the Torah. So the different halachic positions that we find today within the Torah world, and the different hashkafic positions that we find today in the Torah world, the more Dati Leumi, religious Zionist, or however you wish to term, whatever term you choose to use to refer to that position, that philosophy, that understanding of Judaism, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the more Haredi understanding of Judaism. These two positions are not just random hashkafic positions or something based on a whim. These views are based on two diametrically opposed hashkafic understandings of Judaism, based on different halachic positions, namely whether the Kedusha Rishona Kedusha Atid Lavo for all time, or it was not Atid Lavo, was not for all time. This leads to many different conclusions, halachically, hashkafically, and intellectually and psychologically. The difference being between a Judaism which is dynamic, which is proactive, which has a vision and a direction and knows where it wants to go, and actively promotes and does everything in its power to achieve those goals, as opposed to a Judaism which is essentially by definition without a vision and without any direction, without any kind of activism, which is simply trying to maintain that which was indefinitely and hoping for something to change. These are the two positions which underpin the two different halachic and hashkafic positions that we find today in the Jewish world, and that we have seen within the Jewish world for many, many centuries.
The rabbi has described why the Ra'avad's position does not allow the Jewish nation to move forward. Does this fact alone prove that the Ra'avad's position is mistaken?
It is true that this fact alone does not conclusively prove that the Ravad's position is mistaken. But it must be pointed out that the view expressed by the Ravad is not supported by any statement, any pasuk in the Tanakh. It is not supported by any statement by Chazal. There is no explicit statement in Chazal that the Miqdash will fall from heaven. So the question that we need to be asking ourselves really is, where does this approach, where does this hashkafa, where does this view, where does it actually derive from? On what is it based? And the answer is, when one examines this issue, the answer is that it is not based on anything solid, anything authoritative at all. There is, for example, Midrash, Eliyahu Rabbah Perek Kaf Het, where the Midrash states that the Beit Miqdash, kivyachol, I stress the words kivyachol, which means as it were. Kivyachol eno nivna bidei adam era biyadav. In other words, it is not built by human agency, but by Hashem Himself. But it says kivyachol, as it were. In other words, the Midrash does not mean, it does not even intend that it be taken literally. And what exactly it means, one can perhaps debate. But it is not an explicit statement at all to the effect that the Miqdash will literally fall from heaven. It seems that some people, some Chachamim, read this statement in this Midrash, and it should be pointed out, by the way, that this is a very late Midrash, authored even not very much before the time of Rashi, apparently. It is not therefore even from Chazal, but whoever did author this Midrash did not explicitly say that it will fall from heaven, but some people seem to have interpreted that statement in such a fashion that it will literally fall from heaven. So this is what, and this is the implication that we find in the words of the Ravad. But this statement is not something that can be relied upon, or is not something that one can base a philosophy and an outlook upon without much more solid and authoritative sources, and it's certainly not a sufficient basis to claim that we, the Jewish people who have been commanded by Hashem to build the Miqdash and to do many things connected with the Miqdash and many other mitzvot which are related to this matter, to claim that on the basis of such ideas, such notions, we are at liberty to sit back and do nothing about these things, or alternately to claim that it is asur, it is forbidden for us to do anything about these things. This is a wildly unsubstantiated claim, and something which is simply not to be relied upon.
Is it not true that Rashi also writes that the temple will fall from heaven?
It is true that Rashi does write such a thing in two places. In his Perush on the Talmud, Masechet Sukkah Daf Lamed, and Masechet Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed, and Masechet Sukkah Daf Mem Aleph. And I'll read to you briefly what Rashi says. The question of the Gemara, or rather the question that Rashi asks on the Gemara, is as follows. The Gemara suggests in these two places, it says as follows: La saricha de ivne belelia iname samuch l'shkiat hama. Without going into all the details of this discussion, the Gemara is describing the possibility, the hypothetical possibility, how the Miqdash could be built and be completed just before the time for the bringing of the Minhat HaOmer on the 16th of Nisan, in such a time, in such a way that there would not be sufficient time to make the necessary preparations for the bringing of that Minhat HaOmer, that sacrifice, by the early morning hours of the 16th of Nisan. In other words, is it possible that it would be built in such a way and at such a time that it would not be possible to bring that Korban on the 16th of Nisan until much later during the day, until well after midday, for example? So the Gemara suggests that it might be built at night, or it might be built the day before, and seeing that there are many preparations necessary, required for the bringing of this Korban. This Korban involves choosing the grain, finding the right place where this grain can be harvested, and then harvesting it and drying it out over a flame, and then grinding, etc. There's many steps involved which take time, and therefore the Gemara is suggesting if it happened just before the normal time for the bringing of the Qurban, it could be that the Qurban would be delayed by many hours and it would only happen much later during the day of the 16th. The trouble with this suggestion of the Gemara, and it is only a suggestion, as Rashi points out, is that we find in Masechet Shavuot Daf Teth Waw that the Miqdash is not built, neither at night nor on Yom Tov or Shabbat. In other words, the Miswah of building the Miqdash is a very important Miswah, but it is not Doha Yom Tov, and it's not Doha Yom Tov, it's not Doha Shabbat, and it's not to be built at night. Therefore, Rashi says, how can we understand what is being suggested here? And therefore, Rashi says as follows, and I'll read it to you. Rashi says as follows, Ve'i kashya, and if you will ask, you will have the following difficulty, you will ask the following question. The balayla eno nivna. Miqdash is not to be built at night. Why not? The kaimelam b'shavuot. It is written in Masechet Shavuot, da'in binyan beit HaMiqdash balayla. Dichtiv v'yom hakim et HaMishkan. The Gemara learns this from the pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu put the Mishkan together during the day. Uvayom hakim et HaMishkan. V'lo b'hamisar shehu Yom Tov. And how can it be built on Yom Tov? The Gemara there says also that it's not to be built on Yom Tov. And how therefore can the Gemara here in Masechet Sukkah Daf Mem Aleph or in Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed, how can it suggest that it might be built at such a time? Rashi says, Hani mele bevinyan habanui bidei adam. This halacha, this statement applies to a Miqdash which is built by human agency. The human beings actually build with their own hands. Aval Miqdash he'atid shalom l'sapim. The future Miqdash, the third Miqdash, for which we pray and to which we look forward, says Rashi, Banuy meshuchlalhu yigale v'yavo mishamayim. It will appear ready, built, and prepared from heaven. In other words, it will somehow descend from heaven. Shne'emar Miqdash Adonai konenu yadecha. A simple question, first of all. Rashi learns this from the pasuk. Do we have any statement in Chazal based on this pasuk that the future Miqdash will fall from heaven? The answer is no. In fact, in Masechet Ketubot we have the opposite. There we find that the Gemara explains that from this pasuk, Miqdash Adonai konenu yadecha, we learn that the works of the tzaddikim who build the Miqdash are greater than the works of Hashem. Where it doesn't use the term Yadecha on the plural, but it uses, with reference to the creation of the world, it uses the word Yad in the singular. In other words, there it attributes the building of the Miqdash to tzaddikim, to the righteous, to human beings, not to something which falls from heaven. So where did Rashi get this statement or this idea from? The answer is it's not very clear. We do not have any explicit statement in Chazal to this effect, and it should be pointed. Two other things need to be pointed out regarding this statement of Rashi. Which, by the way, it's also true that Tosafot also explain the matter in the same way as Rashi. This question of Rashi, which is based on the fact that the Gemara in Masechet Shavuot Daf Teth Waw claims explicitly that the Miqdash cannot be built neither at night nor on Yom Tov, and therefore how can the Gemara here in Sukkah or Rosh Hashanah suggest such a thing? The fact is that this is suggested by the Gemara in Sukkah and Rosh Hashanah as part of the Hawa Amena, in other words, part of the initial attempt to explain the matter being discussed, the question of why Rabban Yohan ben Zakkai made a certain takana with regards to Hadash, something which we won't go into right now. And that explanation that the Gemara offers is eventually rejected, and the final suggestion is the one that is accepted. In other words, the conclusion of the Sugya is different. And according to that conclusion, this question does not arise at all, and therefore Rashi's statement is only relevant in terms of understanding the mahalach of the Gemara, that is to say, the ongoing discussion of the Gemara until it reaches its conclusion. But the actual conclusion has nothing to do with this question. This question is quite irrelevant, and that this already suggests quite clearly and plainly that this statement of Rashi is not something that we can rely upon, and not something that can change any other known and well-established halakha. That's number one. Number two, taking the Gemara as we have it in the Talmud Bavli and Rosh Hashanah and Sukkah, this is not the only explanation possible. The Meiri, for example, Rabbeinu Menachem HaMeiri in his Perushim on Masechet Sukkah, Rosh Hashanah, explains that we can understand the Gemara, or the suggestion of the Gemara, in two other possible ways. One is that the Sanhedrin of the day, the Beit Din of the day of Am Yisrael, was mistaken, was confused, or was of the opinion that the Miqdash may be built at night or may be built on Yom Tov, that this mitzvah is Doha Yom Tov, and told the Jewish people to go ahead and build it on Yom Tov or build it at night, even though this is not the halacha. So it was a Beit Din Shel To'im. In other words, it was a Beit Din that made a mistake. Such a thing can happen. The Torah itself tells us that a Beit Din, even the Sanhedrin, can make a mistake. That's why we have a whole Masechet called Masechet Horayot. Another suggestion, which I think is even more likely, is that what the Meiri suggests, that this sugya is the Da'at Yahid, follows the opinion of a certain Chacham. We don't know who this Chacham might be, that one might build the Miqdash at night or during Yom Tov, but in fact this is not the halacha. The halacha is what is written in Masechet Shavuot. This is the halacha as the Rambam brings it explicitly, and all the Rishonim agree that the halacha is that one does not build the Miqdash at night, nor does one build the Miqdash on Yom Tov. So even if the sugya here in Rosh Hashanah and Sukkah makes such a suggestion in passing, and even though it's not the conclusion as we've explained, it might be another opinion, a divergent opinion. Such things happen frequently in the Talmud, as everyone who's familiar with it, the ways of the Talmud will affirm. And therefore, this is just one of those aberrations, another view which is not according to the standard halachic view, the psak halacha. And therefore, again, this would not be any basis for changing the well-known halacha, the well-known miswat aseh min ha-Torah, that the Jewish people are required to build a Miqdash. It is a miswat aseh like any other miswat aseh. In fact, it's much more than any miswat aseh. It's one of the central miswot of the Torah. And this is an obligation which is incumbent upon the Jewish people. And such a suggestion as brought in Rashi, or such a suggestion in the sugya of the Gemara here, which is not even the conclusion, could not possibly serve to overturn the well-established halachic facts and the miswot of the Torah, that the Jewish people must build a Miqdash, and this is to be done by human agency, just as the Mishkan was built by human agency, and the first Miqdash was built by human beings, and the second, and therefore also there is no reason whatever to assume, unless we were informed explicitly otherwise, that the third will be any different from the former Miqdashim.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.